Call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, December 4th, 2023. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Councillor Stapleton, absent. Councillor Nishioka?
Here.
Councillor Phillips?
Here.
Councillor Gwynn?
Here.
Councillor Gonzalez, absent. Councillor Hoy?
Here.
Councillor Nordyke?
Here.
Councillor Varney?
Here.
Mayor Hoy?
Here, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Councillor Phillips, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, I move the additions and deletions, which consist of...
Hold on for a second, please.
Oh, sorry.
Do you have a second?
I second that.
Tonight's additions and deletions include the addition of 5.B and then additional testimony under 4A and 5A.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Gonzalez, absent. Councillor Hoy?
Aye.
Councillor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councillor Varney?
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton, absent. Councillor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councillor Phillips?
Aye.
Councillor Gwynn?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye, motion passes. It's time now for council and city manager comments. Do we have any? Councillor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, one and all. The holiday season is upon us. And I want to give some shout out to some individuals out there who understand that this can be a bittersweet time of year for many. The holiday season can be exhausting for our single parents out there. The holiday season can be tough for children who are adjusting to new homes and new relationships, like the more than 200 children who are in foster care right here in Marion County. The holidays can be difficult for caregivers who take care of a person in their lives who is struggling with disabilities or mental illness or any other number of issues. The holidays, in a word, can be a very complex time of year. So I urge everyone out there, practice grace, practice kindness, and practice patience, especially for those who are running around trying to make a holiday special on a limited budget with limited means. So to transition, I'd like to now thank the Salem Main Street Association for putting together an incredible downtown Salem holiday parade. Kudos to our mayor and Mr. Claus, who made an appearance that night for the tree. And also kudos to City Councilor Julie Hoy. Thank you so much for marching with us in the parade. CASA Marion County was there to support and help spread holiday cheer. And there were, gosh, I'm not sure how many people who turned out, but a lot. So I know that pulling off an event like this takes a huge amount of work by the volunteers, the parade organizers, the first responders who shut down the streets, people who coordinated all of us who are marching in the parade. There are so many steps involved. And I hope it was a success, not only for the families who attended, but for all the downtown restaurants, eateries, bars, art galleries, boutiques, makers, bakers, artisans, craftsmen, everyone who gets to work in the downtown core. I hope it was a big success, and you can count on me being there again next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Additional comments? It was a great parade for sure. I really enjoyed it and appreciated the ride and the beautiful vehicle I got to ride in. So, Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to back that up. I thought it was a great night despite the rain. I was soaking wet for like 24 hours after that. But it was a wonderful time. I also just want to acknowledge Councillor Stapleton. She is not here this evening, and I want her to know that my thoughts are with her. And for anyone, as you said, Councillor Nordyke, who is suffering loss at this time, especially at this time of year. It's a big deal. So Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right. We will move on to proclamations, and we are going to start with a proclamation acknowledging Pearl Harbor Day. And Councilor Nishioka, if you would come forward and read that. We don't have anybody to receive that tonight, but we do want to get it on the record. Thank you. And Dan has the microphone for you.
Can everyone hear me? Thank you. Proclamation, whereas December 7th, 1941 marks a somber day in United States history, and whereas we remember the more than 2,400 Americans who lost their lives on that day, including 1,102 sailors permanently entombed in the USS Arizona, and whereas in a speech the following day to a joint session of Congress, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared December 7th, 1941 as a day that will live in infamy. And whereas the events of that tragic day on the Hawaiian island of Oahu at Pearl Harbor propelled America into World War II and gave the nation a resolve that sustained the nation to victory, and whereas because of this victory for democracy and the sacrifices and suffering endured to secure it, the United States has come to know our enemies of then as allies today. And now, therefore, on behalf of Chris Hoy, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim December 7th, 2023 as Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, and encourage the community to reflect on the historic events that occurred 82 years ago and pay tribute to those whose lives were lost. Dated this 4th day of December, 2023. Chris Hoy.
Thank you, Councilor. Certainly.
Thank you. I just want to add to that my husband is third generation American Japanese, and his father's family was interned, and the oldest son did enlist in the 442 and was wounded, received a Purple Heart. So again, this is certainly a day of remembrance for our family.
Thank you, Councilor. And next up, we have Human Rights Day, and I would like to ask Councilor Varney to come forward to read that one. Also, I would like to call up Hamadi Jackson and Lisa Novak to receive the proclamation. Great.
Is it on?
Yes.
Whereas December 10th, 2023 marks the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the General Assembly of the United Nations, and whereas the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief, and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. And whereas, as mayor and as a member of this community, I share in the community's concern as we see our fellow human beings suffer inequity and discrimination, and we work alongside each of you in standing up against bigotry and taking action in support of human rights. And whereas the city of Salem, by definition, the city of peace, supports freedom for all its people and recognizes the need to address issues of racism, poverty, homelessness, discrimination based on religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, and more, while knowing that in our global society, no person is free until all persons are free. And now, therefore, I, on behalf of Chris Hoy, Mayor of the City of Salem, Oregon, do hereby proclaim December 10th, 2023 as Human Rights Day in Salem, and we urge all in the community to respect this day as a stepping stone to equity and inclusion for all people of our city, our nation, and the world. Dated this 4th day of December, 2023.
Offer the microphone to them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council and everyone here. I just want to encourage, I won't take any time, I just want to encourage everybody. We are having Salem Speaks Up. It's going to be on December 10th, which is this Sunday at 1 o'clock at the YMCA. And I want to encourage you guys all to come out and listen to the people, to what they have to say, and take part and participate just whenever you can, please.
Thank you. All right, now we will move on to public comment. We have one person remote, and that is Paul Eckley regarding 5A. Paul Eckley, if you can turn your camera on, introduce yourself, and your address or your ward for the record. And as a reminder, you have 3 minutes. Now I'm being signaled that he is not present online. All right, we'll move over to the people who are present in the room. First up is Tim Lawler. If you would step up to the microphone, turn it on so yep, that one will be just fine. Turn that microphone on so the green light comes on. Introduce yourself and your address or your ward for the record. And you have 3 minutes. When that yellow light starts to flash, that means you have 1 minute left. And then when the red light comes on, that means your time's up.
Hopefully we'll have that. Thank you. Good evening, council. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. My name is Tim Lawler. I'm with Greenlight Development. We are an affordable housing builder in the state of Oregon. We're a housing builder, period, in the state of Oregon. We are proposing to build 120 apartment units here in Salem on Center Street off of the old Salem Hospital property, 23rd in Center Street. Our partner is Home First Development, who has a lot of development experience here in the city of Salem. They've just completed the YMCA Veterans Housing very close to here. They're working on this 27th Street Avenue, which is a Christmas tree lot, and it's a beautiful apartment. We have been awarded roughly $17 million to build this project in the city of Salem. We all know there's a housing crisis here in the state of Oregon and the city of Salem. These homes, we're partnering with also local community members. Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, Seed of Faith Ministries is one of our also major partners and co-developer in this project, this development. It is a 3-phased approach. The first phase will be 120 units of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 bedroom apartments. Family-sized units. There will be a 3,500 square foot community room with multiple meeting offices, rooms, a resident service. So really trying to foster a community. Right now there's a basketball court design there and multiple playground areas. Nice 15-foot pedestrian pathway cutting through the property. Some information, just these units are homes for families, so we can't forget all those that need homes. So our goal here is to put roofs over folks' heads. There is a third phase potentially down the line that will be a co-located, affordable early childhood development. There's a commercial lot that's part of this sale. But the real reason I'm here today is we have asked the city to help us in this acquisition of land from the hospital. There is a timeline with the hospital and their desire to sell the property, and there's a timeline for our funding as affordable housing developers from lenders and also from the state. As I mentioned, we have awarded funds from the state. And so the request you see in section 5B is for the city we can assign the PSA to them, and then they'll help us get there with the development. And we are submitting for land use at this point in the project, and we should be breaking ground in the summer. So that is the goal. So July to be building 120 new homes, and we'll have a phase 2, which should be going in for funding request in March, April. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm here for any questions as needed.
Thank you. We'll have a full presentation later on in the agenda. And next up is Lynn Takata. Yes, just hit that button so the green light comes on. There you go.
Button. Thank you to the mayor and city councilors for allowing me to share some of the input from our neighborhood association, Northeast Neighbors. I'm chair of NEN, and we appreciate your service and all of the volunteer hours that you all put in to make our city better. So I'm a resident of Ward 1 and been the chair of NEN for a few years. Over the last 6 months, our neighborhood association has reached out to the various partners that are working on this development, Seed of Faith Ministries, Green Light Development, and Community Action. And we've worked diligently to try to, create collaborative partnerships, which is ideal. I don't think we've received as much traction as we had hoped. I'm here to advocate for the city to support the goals the council has already adopted in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, and multimodal transportation. If the city does not ask new developers to try to meet those goals, we are never, as a city, going to meet some of these, climate change goals and other goals the council has already adopted. It's just good, kind of PR to say that the city has a climate change plan unless there's some kind of action that accompanies, that. So I am understanding from speaking with a number of people who are in the room that there's a possibility that there might be conditions that could be attached. And I wanted to say that we are absolutely supportive of the purchase. We're absolutely supportive of affordable housing. So we're not a NIMBY organization in any way, but we're asking for this development to, meet some of those goals. So we're hoping the council can consider attaching some of the conditions to the sale of the property to, further climate change, transportation, pedestrian and bicycle access, and most importantly, a safe pedestrian crossings on D Street, because this development serves families, and there's 3 schools where the children have to cross D Street, and it's not safe. There's no sidewalk on the south side of the street at all. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, now we are on to the consent calendar. Councilor Phillips.
I move the consent calendar with the exception of 3.2E, which was pulled by Councilor Nishioka.
Second.
Motion by Phillips, second by Varney. Councilor, to your motion.
So tonight's consent calendar consists of 3.2A, which is a dedication of Reserve Strip Track A of Battle Creek Heights number 2 as public right-of-way. 3.2B, dedication of Block B of Battle Creek Estates number 4 as public right-of-way. 3.2C, dedication of city property as public right-of-way to be known as Simpson Street Southeast. Page turn. 3.2D, dedication of city property as public right-of-way for Fisher Road Northeast. 3.3A, grant agreements to pass state fund, grant agreements to pass state grant funds through to the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. 3.3B, the NOAA Grant Application Cooperative Agreement. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there any further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Hoy?
Aye.
Councillor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councillor Varney?
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton absent. Councillor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councillor Phillips?
Aye.
Councillor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councillor Gonzalez absent. Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we are on to item 4A, public hearing.
The Salem City Council will now conduct a public hearing to consider A petitioner-initiated annexation of territory located at 572 Heil Lane Northeast. The criteria applicable to the decision is at SRC 260.010 G2A, Roman numeral I, Roman numeral II, Roman numeral III, and Roman numeral IV, and SRC 260.010 GB, Roman numeral I, Roman numeral II. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing in person or in writing, or failure to provide statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to provide the parties and the City Council an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will begin with a staff presentation. The applicant is limited to 10 minutes. Applicable neighborhood association limited to 5 minutes. Other interested parties limited to 3 minutes. The applicant may have up to 5 minutes rebuttal testimony limited to issues raised during public testimony.
I see Mr. Bishop has joined us at the microphone. It's all yours.
Oh, good evening, Mayor Hoy, members of the council. Bryce Bishop with the Community Development Department, here to present the staff report for the annexation before you this evening. It's an annexation for property at 572 Heil Lane Northeast, and it includes not only an annexation, but with that request, a comp plan and zone change to change the land use designations that are applicable to the property upon its annexation. So in terms of the subject property itself, up on the screen here I have a vicinity map, and so on the left-hand side, or the west end, to the west is the downtown. So the property in question is over near the east end of the city, near Cordon Road, which is the UGB. So it's shown in the red asterisk. So it's between generally Center Street, south of Center, and north of Auburn. And again, it's contiguous to the city limits on the north, south, and east, and it is proposed for annexation. So in terms of the comprehensive plan designation that currently applies to the property, it is designated developing residential on the city's comprehensive plan map. And with this annexation request, the applicant is requesting to change the designation to multifamily residential in order to allow the continuation of an existing multifamily development that's been approved to the north to continue and extend in a second phase onto this property. So as you can see on the map, the designations that surround the property include a mix of single-family residential, which is the yellow area shown on the map. Of course, the multifamily orange to the north. To the south, developing residential, which is like a single-family or middle housing designation. And then there's also some public land to the southeast, accommodating, or southwest rather, where there's a school. And so it's kind of a mix in terms of the designation there. And then we have a node of mixed use also to the southeast, where we have neighborhood hub zoning. So in terms of the zoning of the property, because it's in the county still, it's designated Marion County Urban UD, or urban development. And the property that you see, the properties in color there are the ones that are in the city. All the ones that are grayed out, those are still in the county. So this proposal would change the designation of the property to, with the request, to multifamily residential RM2, which is the city's kind of medium density multifamily zoning. We have RM1, RM2, and an RM3. So this would be the middle range RM2. And again, it's to match the designation of the property to the north to allow the continuation of a previously approved first phase of a multifamily development, the Cascade Vista Apartments. And so surrounding zoning is to the east is single-family residential. You have single-family equivalent zones in the county where we have single-family homes, and then again that neighborhood hub kind of brown color zoning right there, which would allow for a little bit of a mix of uses there for some commercial opportunities near this multifamily and to provide services. So in terms of the site itself, it's 0.78 acres in size. It is, again, contiguous to an existing 120 unit apartment development, and the property in question is outlined by the white line here. In terms of natural resources, the site is flat. There are no trees on the property, and it is adjacent to the reach of the east fork of the Little Pudding River. But as you can see in the staff report that's provided, the applicants did provide a wetland study, and the wetland consultant determined that there are no wetlands or non-wetland waters on the subject property. Center Street is to the north, and transit service, 15-minute transit service is available to the property along Center Street. And even though the property is addressed off of Heil Lane today, Heil Lane is a private flag lot access way, and so there will not be any proposed vehicle access, from, this development, through that private flag lot access way to Auburn Road. It'll all be to the north through the existing multifamily development. So Center Street will be the primary access for vehicles. There will, however, be emergency vehicle access as a secondary forms of access to the property as required under the fire code. And there is an easement that crosses the properties to the south in order to serve that property. So they do have that access right. So as I previously mentioned, this is a second phase of a multifamily development. The first phase included 120 units that are completed in terms of construction. This would allow one additional building to be proposed as shown on the conceptual site plan here. Building 7 would be the new building that would be proposed. Oops, sorry, let me go back. And the red line here is the current city limits. So where the building is proposed in the second phase, obviously it would be over the city limits line, so, and a property line. So they're requesting this annexation in order to allow the development to be completed. And so it'll include one additional building of 18 units, parking and landscaping to serve the development. As identified in the staff report, the request meets the approval criteria for an annexation. It results in orderly development. It's a voter exempt annexation. Services can be provided efficiently at urban densities. It will include the withdrawal from 2 service districts, the Marion County Fire District Number 1 and the East Salem Sewer and Drainage District. And the annexation will serve the public interest by bringing that additional land in the city so it can provide for additional multifamily units that will actually be constructed to help address our housing deficits. In terms of the concurrent comprehensive plan change and zone change request with this request was previously heard by the Planning Commission as required under the procedures for this type of application. The Planning Commission reviewed the requested land use designations and found that they met the applicable criteria of the code in Chapter 64 and recommended council to change the designation of the property to multifamily residential and its zoning to RM2 when it is annexed. The requested designation is equally or better suited than the existing designation of the property. It allows for that existing multifamily development to be extended and completed in a logical fashion. And so therefore that's why the recommendation was made by the Planning Commission to adopt those changes. In terms of testimony received, the property is within the East Lancaster Neighborhood Association. They submitted testimony generally in favor of the request. They did, however, note that they had heard some concerns from neighbors about construction noise, for the first phase starting too early. And our response at that time was there is a noise ordinance that the city has that limits certain types of activities to specific times of the day. And so like construction noise, you can't begin construction, can be working later than 10 or earlier than 7 on the next day. So when the second phase comes in for further construction, that is something that will apply, and so they will have to abide by those requirements of the code. And then we did receive one additional written comment that was, I believe, included in your packet from a person who used to live on the property and indicating support for the request to have additional families living in this area and help to meet the city's housing needs. And that was, those were the items of testimony submitted. Based on that, we are recommending the council approve the annexation, change its designation from developing residential to multifamily residential, its zoning from Marion County UD to RM2, withdraw the territory from Marion County Fire District 1 and the East Salem Sewer and Drainage District, and advance the proposal to second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. We have one person signed up for testimony, so Garrett Stevenson.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Hoy and councilors. My name is Garrett Stevenson. I am legal counsel for the applicant. I don't really have anything substantive to add to Bryce's excellent report here, but I did want to let you all know that the applicant is here and is happy to respond to any questions you may have. I also want to point out one nice piece of this is that we did identify in the application an ongoing deficit of multifamily land that this city has. This is, only 0.78 acres, but it is one little step into a broader walk towards getting enough land to meet the city's multifamily housing demand. So we'd ask that you adopt the findings that Bryce has prepared for you. We did get a unanimous, I believe a unanimous approval at Planning Commission, and ask that you vote to approve this annexation.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Stevenson? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anybody who didn't have a chance to sign up who wanted to testify regarding this matter? All right. Do we have any questions for staff? Councilor Gwynn.
Minor question. Bryce, you indicated that there will be vehicle access for emergency vehicles. Is there access now for like kids that go to Auburn Elementary to cross the street there? And
No, there isn't a designated crossing of Auburn at where that private driveway comes onto Auburn.
but can they walk that way to get to school, or?
Yeah, I can't recall if there are sidewalks on Auburn or not, but certainly there isn't any a direct, like crossing, pedestrian flashing access across that road to get there. But yeah, to the southwest there is a school, but yeah, that's.
There are sidewalks now on Auburn.
Okay, thank you.
Just recently, that's a recent development. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? All right, close the public hearing. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we approve the annexation of the territory located at 572 Heil Lane Northeast, including a minor comprehensive plan map amendment to multifamily residential and zone change to RM2, and withdrawal of the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1 and East Salem Sewer and Drainage District, and advance to first reading.
Second.
Motion by Hoy, second by Nordijk. Councilor, do you have anything to add to your motion?
I do not, except thank you to the property owner for recognizing the need in that area and seeing fit to make it available for this kind of housing. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Nordijk?
Aye.
Councillor Varney? Aye. Councillor Stapleton, absent. Councillor Nishioka?
Aye.
Councillor Phillips?
Aye.
Councillor Gwynn?
Aye.
Councillor Gonzalez, absent. Councillor Hoy?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we are on to item 5A, Revenue Task Force discussion and information. I believe we have Colleen Rosillas, who has joined us remotely. Good evening, Colleen. I'm going to kick it over to you.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Great to see you all. I have a short presentation tonight for us to go through and get feedback from Council on key elements of the Revenue Task Force we all discussed last week so that we can put together a charter and application for the task force. So I'm going to share my screen. On just about every slide, I'll do a little bit of an overview of what our recommendation is or the information that we're looking for you all, and then I'll turn it over to you all for input. So as a reminder, we're here, you all agreed to form a revenue task force just a week ago. The goal is to provide project management and facilitation of the process to identify new revenue sources for your consideration in July. You can see here an overview of the process. The Revenue Task Force does not operate in a vacuum and will be in tandem with the city's budget process, which will consider adjustments, including potential cuts to the current fiscal year budget, as well as the fiscal year 2025 budget. We anticipate that information will be shared between those two processes. And over on the right-hand side, the work streams for the Revenue Task Force will all share information as well. So tonight we're going to go through pieces of the charter, including the purpose, the outcome, Revenue Task Force membership, the representation that we'd like to see, and talk a little bit about participation. So first up, I have the task force purpose. So we have two bullets here. One is stating the purpose of the task force to explore new additional revenue sources and any adjustments to fees that could sustain those services that do not have a dedicated revenue stream consistent with the motion that I created this task force last week. The task force work will be carried out in parallel with the work of the Budget Committee and City Council as you consider amendments to the adopted budget and formulate the proposed 2025 budget based on revised revenue projections. A gut check for you all. Did these two bullets reflect the intended purpose of the task force?
So I believe Colleen's asking us for feedback on this first slide. Does anybody have any feedback? Councilor Nishioka.
I believe that that fits what we've asked for.
I agree. Anybody else? Councilor Phillips.
I think I agree with this wholeheartedly, but I just want to verify that if one were to think that there's an opportunity to, decrease the amount that we're spending as a city, that would be through the budget committee process. So we'd kind of be focusing that outside of the revenue task force.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anybody else have feedback? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I just know from speaking from a member of Budget Committee that at least one member of the Budget Committee, but I suspect all of them, will continue to want to provide their own input on revenue decisions, cuts, any and all of the above. I know that's something that is meaningful to them. And so I just wanted to share that input, that they will, I think, be interested in hearing what the Revenue Task Force is doing, not to weigh in or supersede or intervene with what they're doing. But the feedback that I'm getting from Budget Committee is that they are very interested in what revenue options arise through this process. But I don't have an objection to the task force purpose. I just wanted to share that feedback with the group.
Thank you, Councilor. Any additional feedback for Colleen? Okay, looks like we agree.
Great, one down. All right, so the outcome of the task force, this is, there's a lot of information on this slide, so just go through. This is mostly reflecting the feedback you all gave last week. So first, review the city's financial situation, be presented with possible options to sustain current city services funded by the general fund that can include police, fire, homeless response, parks, and libraries. Second, that the task force may consider all revenue options available to cities in Oregon. Third, that it will evaluate the appropriateness of those revenue sources to meet the city's current and long-range needs. Fourth, that after reviewing those alternatives, the task force will recommend to the City Council new or additional revenue options or changes to current fees that should be explored. And then finally, the City Council will use this input in their ongoing deliberations about the city's current and future budget. So, question for you all, did these statements reflect our desired outcome?
Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you. I agree with this series of statements. One thing I want to underline, underscore, bedazzle, use neon ink for is we're talking about general fund. And a lot of our constituents don't know the difference between general fund and all these other pots of money that we have. And so whether you're talking at neighborhood association meetings or looking at social media posts, there is a lot of opportunities for educating folks when they see that we've, approved grant money for an apartment complex, for example. They think we're using general fund dollars for that when we are not. We're using URA money, or we're using other pots of money, or we're using system development charges, for example. So I just want to encourage Colleen, as she facilitates the task force, that make sure everyone on that task force understands we're talking about general fund. And when you do your focus groups, when you talk to the public, remember that they may not be familiar with general fund versus the other funds that we have. And that would be a great way to help explain to the public that we have separate pots of money and we have to spend them in accordance with what we can do legally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Additional feedback? I'll just add that I concur with these statements for the outcome. Anybody else? I'm seeing a nod from Councilor Nishioka. Would you like to say that out loud? Okay. Councilor Phillips, did yours nodding as well?
Yeah, this looks like an excellent summary of what I thought the consensus was from last week.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, looks like that's your feedback.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about task force membership. We're not sure how many folks are going to apply to the task force, and some of the information that we'll collect tonight will also lead into the size. So 3 points on this slide. The first is we're aiming for about 20 members appointed by City Council. We'll use the standard boards and commissions appointment process, and any vacancies may be filled by council through the same process. Do we agree with this approach? Any other information we want to put in terms of the size and how we'll actually appoint folks to the task force?
Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I was wondering if we might consider having an additional 2 or 3 people that we may want to have as alternates, as this process might take 6 months or potentially longer. There may be members that would have to leave, and it would be nice if we had alternates that were in the process so that they could step in if that you felt that would be necessary.
That's totally fine with me if your colleagues agree.
I'm seeing 2 head nods from Varney and Nordijk. And and Phillips, go ahead.
So I'm okay with the idea of having alternates. I mean, I think I'll be the guy again. I think that this is on the smaller side. I understand that we're trying to be efficient and not get too cumbersome, but it would be my preference that we're probably closer to 25 or 30 at a minimum, just because I think that this process is going to take a lot of work, but I think this is a good starting point.
Thank you, Councilor. Any additional feedback? Councilor Nordijk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not articulated on this slide, so perhaps it is discussed later, but I feel like there should be a bullet point that precedes the first one, which is how do we let the public know that we are recruiting members of this task force? So in terms of the recruitment process, I encourage Colleen to use an equity lens to make sure that we are reaching our communities of color, groups who traditionally have not been invited to participate in this process. So that's the bullet point I would add to the list if there's no separate slide to address the recruitment of the task force members.
We will get there.
Any additional feedback on this one about size and process? Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Councilor Nordijk, for bringing up the equity lens. I think that's a good thing to call attention to. I guess my question in a similar vein, is this the time where we would mention there was a couple of us talking about creating some assistance for people in need of childcare?
I think right now we're talking about the size and the process. Okay. I think those topics will be in later slides.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Gwynn.
I'm not quite sure how to articulate my concern, so bear with me. But if we use the standard boards and commissions appointment process, I'm just concerned that we won't have as diverse of opinions, or people that might have opinions that differ from the majority of this council.
Okay. Councilor Nordijk.
Thank you, Councilor Gwen, for sharing that. Do you have any suggested alternatives to this course?
What if each councilor made one appointment and then boards and commissions did the remainder?
Colleen, do you have thoughts on that at all, or?
Yeah, I have seen task forces and other committees be appointed that way. So each counselor and the mayor selecting one representative. We may get into a little bit of a challenge. I think maybe we should go actually on to the next slide so we can look at the characteristics that we're looking for the community members, and that might help to inform this decision. I will have people who, sort of check multiple boxes in terms of characteristics that we want on the task force. I think it's fine to do a council member appointment and do a hybrid approach there.
Councilor Varney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question for Councilor Gwynn. Would individuals go through the same application process, though? Use the same application that we use for boards and commissions?
I guess they could.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't just appoint my brother or something.
No, I didn't. I was just. You might. Okay. No, thanks.
Councilor Hoy, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just think it's a good point to make, that obviously we've had differing opinions in the room, and I think it is important to make sure that everyone is represented. So, thank you.
Colleen, do you want to go on to the next slide? Maybe we'll come back to this
Yeah.
as you suggested. Okay.
Let's do that. So we have two slides kind of on characteristics or demographics. So the first is, so we're thinking about the kind of person that we want on the task force. So we have people who are interested in learning, listening, asking good questions, can help connect with the broader community, those who care deeply about the future of our community, value the services provided by the city, that council recognizes that certain groups and organizations have unique knowledge and perspective, and space may be reserved for them. And we have a slide coming with some examples of that. So a great example would be the Chamber of Commerce. So our question here is, do these reflect just kind of the general maybe culture of the task force we're trying to create? Anything else you'd want to put here?
Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you again, Mayor Hoy. So this looks very good. I think it does offer that opportunity for a counselor to encourage individuals they feel would fit. I think that might actually address what Councilor Gwynn is saying. We will, I'm sure, discuss whether or not a counselor would select a person. I also, going back a bit, when we were talking about 20 people, I do get worried, as Councilor Phillips thought it might be nice to have more. My concern is sometimes more people don't necessarily bring solidarity to ideas. Sometimes it can get more difficult with more people. And I believe you spoke to that last meeting in the sense that 20 was a good number. But as far as the process, I like the examples that you have here, in that we, as counselors, start investigating, and that would start to stimulate the conversation and people applying.
Any additional feedback on membership characteristics? Councilor Phillips.
I mean, I've said it before, and this may be kind of baked into this. It may not be. I just want to make sure that, like, in that first line or somewhere in here, there's like a genuine willingness to consider raising revenues. But if you come in just convinced that only one way is the correct way, that's going to be challenging, especially if it's like, the purpose of this one as opposed to the budget committee, where we'll have to, cut services if we don't raise revenue to budget within the constraints by our own policy as well as the state standards. We need to look at other forms of revenue. I mean, it's not the only thing. There are fees that we can do, but if someone comes in like, no, we're not doing anything to raise revenue, that's challenging. I mean, I get that, like, we want to hear from a large body of people, but it's just like, if you come in to like tank the process, that I want to avoid that. I don't know how to codify that. I just want my comments on the record.
Thank you, Councilor. Additional feedback? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm listening to the feedback from my colleagues here, and I'm trying to process and think through it. If we were to have individual counselors nominate folks, I liked what I interpreted as Councilor Varney's suggestion is people should still fill out the same application so that people are being essentially scored on the same criteria. So if we are going to do that, you know, it's not by appointing buddies or favorites, and that's not what Councilor Gwen is doing. I'll appoint your brother, no problem. I'm kidding. We all know that's not what you meant, but to me, that's a funny one. I'm fine with that, but I like the idea of, you know, Councilor Varney saying, well, they should all still have the application, and the application should identify these characteristics so that there are no illusions about, well, I know so-and-so, therefore I'm a shoo-in. That's not how this should work. That's not how it should work at all, and I see nods from folks in the room. We need people who are serious about this. In my view, I know what I'm looking for, and I am looking for open-minded folks. I'm looking for folks to bring a variety of points of view. I mentioned last time there's a big difference between having a mom and pop shop, having that small business voice versus the large employer or big business voice. And then there's my problem, there's so many people I can think of who would be well qualified to serve on this committee. Whether they have the time and the bandwidth is going to create the real issue. That, unfortunately, a lot of times is where decision-making becomes inequitable, because the folks who have the time to give, never mind the money, do they have the time to give? There's only certain individuals out there who have that ability. That's something you can't buy. But anyway, I'm supportive of Councilor Gwen's recommendation, but I would just want to see a uniform application and a uniform deadline, just a uniform set of rules so that it's fair.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm having a little bit of a difficult time picturing how the process would work. So if everybody does the same application, same timeline, so one group would come through the committee and one group would just go directly to an individual counselor?
I'm thinking out loud here, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I believe on our applications there's a checkable box for what ward you're in. What if all the Ward 4 applicants go to the Ward 4 counselor? I don't know. Just throwing this out here. This is Councilor Gwen's idea, but that's how I would handle it.
What we could do is have a certain number of spots on the task force, X appointed by counselors. For each of you who will do the appointment, review the applications from your ward, and make your recommendation to the boards and commissions committee. And then that's part of that process. So it will be similar to lots and lots of committees and commissions have gubernatorial appointees, and there's a certain number. Typically, those organizations provide the resumes, provide the folks they actually want appointed, and the governor's office makes that final call.
Councilor Phillips.
I think that on the previous slide, we'd looked at 20. I guess my question is that 20 include the 9 of us? Or is that 20 in addition to the 9 of us?
We're not on it.
So this is different. We're not on the Revenue Task Force?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not as currently contemplated.
Because I thought at some point, I thought we had been, like.
I think that was a suggestion of a couple of folks. I think that the staff's recommendation at this point is that the council not be included on the task force. Since it's basically advising us, we'll be receiving all of their feedback and then making decisions from that.
And then I would need to be reminded, when we had a task force several years ago, was council part of that? The last time?
The mayor served on that task force in 2018. Many task forces of this nature have one council liaison to report back to council about what's happening, and that's absolutely up to you.
I missed the first part of what you said, Colleen.
In 2018, the mayor served on the revenue task force.
Okay, thank you.
And it had 14 members.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilor Phillips.
I would like you to serve on the task force.
I'm sure you would.
But I mean, seriously, I would at least want a couple of us there to kind of help with the communication process. Not that I'm volunteering to do it. I wouldn't opposed, but I don't know if I can.
Councillor Hoy.
If I may ask, what do we expect the time commitment to be for this task force? Is there any idea yet?
We expect there's going to be 1 to 2 meetings a month over the course of 6 months. Those meetings are likely going to be about 2 hours each, plus work in between.
Thank you. Oh, one other thing.
Uh-huh.
And to Councillor Phillips' point, I don't want anybody in the room who's just there to put a stake in the ground and not be cooperative. But I do kind of want to know that there's somebody in the room who's willing to listen for what the Budget Committee might be up to, and if there's a way to help the task force get to a number or a pathway, I think it would be helpful.
Any other feedback on membership characteristics? Councillor Nordyke.
I respectfully disagree with Councillor Phillips. I think this is a great time for council to not serve, honestly. We have plenty of say. They will make recommendations to us only, right? Nothing that they do will be binding upon us. Just based on the experiences I've had with serving in other capacities, I feel that having members of our body on there, we might exert too much influence. And because, we ultimately make all the financial decisions. So honestly, I would rather us not be present. I want them to feel completely free to talk about any options on the table. And if one member of council's present, especially if the mayor is present, people may be concerned that the mayor is speaking for the rest of us, when I think the mayor's made clear throughout this meeting that he wants to hear from each of us. And so while I value your opinion, I have no doubt we will have plenty of opportunities to talk about the revenue options that come before us. I want this task force to feel completely free to throw out any crazy idea they like, until Colleen is blushing. I want them to find a way to really be creative, outside the box thinkers. And I think they can be more candid if we're not present. I respect your point of view, but on this one, that's where I'm coming from.
Except for the blushing part, I agree with everything Councillor Nordyke just said. I think it's I would really argue strongly against any member of the council serving. I just think that this is an advisory task force to us. They should do their work. We should receive it and consider it from there. That's why I often say I don't participate a lot of times in feedback or different things because I already have an outsized input or influence on things. And so it's really time, I think, for the community to do this and for us to hear from them. That's my take on it. Councillor Phillips.
I think I've been persuaded. I mean, realistically, I don't have the time to do this, so, yeah.
And then there's that.
Yeah.
So. There's all the things we said, and then there's the whole time commitment.
And I guess I was a little bit caught off guard. So is the goal in this also to depoliticize it, potentially? I mean, is that like an additional advantage, or am I just...
Well, I'm hoping that this will not be a political conversation that this task force has. Yeah.
Okay.
I would.
I mean, it seems like an advantage. Having us not there potentially could depoliticize it.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm convinced. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Colleen, do you have everything you need on this slide?
I do. Thank you all so much.
All right.
So let's talk about representation, and I think this will be the most robust conversation of the night. These are options for you all to think about when we're thinking about those potential council appointees, who you might select, who the boards and commission process will try to get in terms of getting broad representation across the Salem community. So we're thinking about a variety of lived experience. We heard that loud and clear last week, variety of life stages and ethnicity and backgrounds. And they might overlap with other affiliations. So we're not necessarily looking for one person for each box, but what we are looking for is to say we want a broad representation of folks across Salem, particularly folks who aren't commonly participating in government. So we're going to start out with asking for a place of residence, things like ward representation. Do we want to ask for type of residence? Is it important to know, for example, if someone lives in a single family home, or are they a renter, or are they a homeowner? Employment and income, so self-employed, part-time or multiple jobs, full-time, retired, unemployed, whether place of work is inside or outside of Salem, business ownership and number of employees. As a number of you have mentioned, there's a difference between owning a large business and owning a mom and pop shop with one employee, or maybe you're self-employed. Life experience, so thinking about whether folks have lived unsheltered, if they have been under threat of losing their housing, if they have experienced food insecurity or earned less than the livable wage. I want to note for livable wage, we used, MIT has a city level livable wage calculator, and so they have identified a single adult with 2 children would need to be earning $44.46 an hour to be considered a livable wage in Salem. Language access, so do we speak a language in addition to English at home? And then demographics, so thinking about race and ethnicity, gender affiliation, age in certain ranges. We'd like to not make the application really, really long, but what we also want to do is collect enough information from folks so that we can see what this representation looks like. So we would love your feedback on what community characteristics you want represented on this task force.
Well, my thoughts on it are, I think that it's an excellent way to gather the information of the kind of people that I think we talked about last time. My only concern is that our application process might be very complicated, and I think we had a desire to keep it pretty simple, because this doesn't, I think we wanted to ask some more substantive questions about revenue and that sort of thing, in addition to any of these kinds of demographic issues. So I just worry about people not being willing to go through the application process if it's too complicated. Any other feedback? Councilor Varney.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I'm just trying to clarify, so will this only be open to residents of Salem? And then would it matter if, I was just thinking of another question of maybe length of residence, possibly.
Well, I think to your first question, that's up to us. And second question is, I think that might be interesting as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you. I want to have my cake and egg too. First of all, I wish our applications currently asked all these questions. I find all of this information helpful and informative for any numbers of boards and committees that we provide. So I wish all of our applications had these requests. But I also acknowledge what our mayor is saying. The more complicated the application, the more of a language barrier you're creating. And it's important that we follow what the state does in terms of abiding by roughly an 8th grade level of reading, comprehension, and the ability to complete the application. So, Colleen, I want you to do what the mayor said and have all that information somehow too. I know you can do it. I believe in you.
Any additional feedback? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you again, Mayor Hoy. So in what Councilor Varney was indicating about being a resident of the city, or you have on here a business ownership, I'm feeling like the people applying should either be a resident of the city or own a business in the city. Sometimes that may mean that they work outside of the city, or that they live outside of the city, but they still are tied to the city either as a resident or as a business. So I would like to elaborate that a bit. Like they might live in the county, but they own a business in Salem, they should be allowed as well.
Any additional feedback? Colleen, do you have what you need on that?
Yeah, let's move on. So when we're thinking about that statement we had earlier about some groups might bring additional experience or expertise or representation that we want on this task force, and we may reserve space for them or prioritize them, here are some recommendations that we have for those particular slots. And that may fill, for example, Councilor Nishioka and Councilor Varney thinking about, do you own a business in Salem? So some of the things that we might want to discuss here, at-large community members, so those could be council appointees, they could be other folks, a representative from the Chamber of Commerce, someone who owns a downtown business, a member of Salem 350, a member of the Latino Business Alliance, a member, someone who works at or volunteers at a social services agency, a representative from a city employee union. And then the city manager has spoken to the Oregon Department of Administrative Services, and they're willing to have one non-voting representative on this task force. So we'd like feedback on this particular list, and if there are any other community groups, any organizations that we might want to elevate to have on that list of desired representatives.
Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleen, why downtown business and not just a business owner anywhere in the city?
It can be a business owner anywhere in the city. This is just here's some examples.
Well, my recommendation would be I wouldn't want it to limit to only business owners who have located their brick and mortar space in downtown.
Additional feedback? I guess my thoughts on this one are, it depends on the outcome of our earlier conversation on whether or not I think this fits. If we end up with doing council appointments, I'm not sure these numbers work.
So it may be, for example, that your council appointee is also the Chamber of Commerce representative and may also be a business owner. Some of these may overlap.
So if we have 9 council appointees, that would leave 3 positions for the boards and commissions group to fill the rest of the slots with. It would
leave 11.
11, okay.
Mm-hmm. About 11. So if we have more applicants and boards and commissions wants to take on more folks, absolutely can do that. When we see who we have, that's also a good gut check for, does it look like we got the right representation? And it gives us the opportunity to do a little bit more advertising as well.
I guess I'm not following your math. If we have 9 appointees on a 20-member commission, but I guess what you're saying is the boards and commission group would look at the people that were appointed by the councilors and then try to fill in the gaps around them? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So
okay.
For example, there could be a person who wants to be the representative from the Latino Business Alliance who lives in Ward 4, who also is a small business owner that could fulfill all 3 characteristics if that's what we're going for. And so that's 1 seat. We also could have an individual person filling each of those 3 characteristics in 3 different seats.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Hoy.
Just to clarify, we wouldn't be appointing anyone. We would be recommending someone for application. And then kind of what Colleen is saying now would happen. We might have two counselors might recommend the same type of candidate, a business owner or a whatever, and we wouldn't need the duplication if we have that represented, right? Is that close? So they're not, we don't have the ability to just appoint someone. They still have to apply.
It would be, what I would suggest is we get all the applications in. For those that are in your ward, Councilor Hoy, you would review those applications and identify the person that you would like to appoint as your council appointee. They may fill some of these other characteristics as well. That's part of the boards and commissions committee process to know who the 9 council recommended appointees are. And then we fill in the other slots after we fill in those 9.
Thank you.
Councilor Nishioka.
And how fast are we going to do this?
That's exactly the thought I was just having. I was thinking, wow, that's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on representation? Are these the groups that we want? Do we want other groups in there? Do we want to delete some of these groups? Councilor Phillips.
I would argue for a few more, as I have previously, but I think I have a better understanding. When I argued for 30, I was under the impression that we were all on it. So I think we're closer to what I'm envisioning.
I think so.
Yeah. But with this, you know, I think that 20 may still be a little small, and I would be flexible going up to like 24, 25, if Colleen and others thought that was, you know, still wieldy.
Well, she's given you her recommendation, but we can make our own decision.
So, okay, that's a good way to interpret it. So you feel, Colleen, within the 20, we can get sufficient, you know, equity, diversity, and lived experience?
I think we can. I would say we could also say we're looking for 20 to 30. You know, that's not gonna kill us if we have more folks. The most important thing is that we have a small enough group that folks can all participate equally. So it doesn't matter if we have equitable representation, if folks aren't comfortable speaking up, if there's not enough space to do that. You know, in a room of 30 people, if we ask a question and everybody answers in 3 minutes, that's an hour and a half meeting, right? So we want to make sure that we are giving folks that time to participate. I think there is a piece of also having that gut check of just what kind of applications we get and how many we get. Your last task force had 14 members, and it was a very prescribed process, really based on representation from these different groups. So this task force being open to the community, we may get a lot of folks who are interested, and we may come back to you once we have that application open for some time and have a conversation about it.
Councilor Nordyke, then Councilor Verney.
Thank you. While we're brainstorming here, I'm wondering if we might want to consider a couple more ex officios. And I'm thinking specifically about the social service agency folk. A lot of them run NGOs, non-governmental organizations, or nonprofits where they may have a lot of insight that they would like to add, but if the conversation gets political, and we hope it doesn't, but if it does, they may not feel comfortable voting on the ultimate recommendations that come back to us. And so I'm wondering if having an ex officio position for social services agencies, plural, might be beneficial, because there are so many out there who would add a great deal to this conversation, but may feel more comfortable in sort of I will give you information, I will share you what I know from my organization, but I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily voting on revenue ideas, because our social services agencies see firsthand the food insecurity, housing insecurity, a lot of the other issues on the prior page. They may have a lot of great firsthand knowledge and expertise in that arena, but are they willing to actually cast a vote? That might be a whole other matter, and it would be a shame to completely miss out on that expertise.
Any additional thoughts? Councilor Verney.
I kind of like your idea of having someone from a nonprofit on to increase some diversity. Are these just kind of suggestions? What if we have a category that we don't have any applicants for? Does that matter?
These are all suggestions, and I wouldn't want to make the requirements binding. What you want is folks who want to serve on the task force first and foremost. But these are all statements that are ultimately a goal of representation on the task force.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. That's great.
Any additional feedback on desired representation? Colleen, do you have what you need? Okay.
I do. So let's talk about what we're going to give to our participants for participating, which was a great discussion last week. So there are two pieces here that I want to discuss. The first is stipend and expense coverage. So we recommend a per meeting stipend. I've put $100 on the slide. I've seen per meeting stipends anywhere from $25 to $200. The goal of the stipend is to be spent at the member's discretion so that they can support their own participation. Something like childcare or transportation could be included. We're not going to ask folks how they spent it. Task force members may waive the stipend, so if you don't need it, you don't have to claim it. They do have to be claimed as taxable income, however. Childcare was a big part of our discussion last week as well. From a risk management perspective, it's pretty difficult. The city's not in the business of providing childcare, so the city won't provide childcare. But our task force meetings are going to be family friendly and open to those with caregiving responsibilities. Our team is not going to kick out any kids, any folks who are engaged in elder care or other types of care if they're in the room. We'll make sure that we'll work with city staff to meet in spaces where there is room in case, for example, a family has to attend and childcare fell through. That's totally fine with us, and we can get a lot of work done. I have 2 young kids, so I'm happy to work with them and with anybody else's kids in the room. So what we'd like to know is if you are comfortable with this recommended approach, and if you have other considerations such as the value of the stipend, other things we want to provide to task force members.
Thoughts on this one? Councilor Phillips.
This looks good. I appreciate it being codified.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Councilor Nishioka.
To my suggestion of possibly having a couple alternates, I would recommend that if we do that, we would provide them a very small stipend of, say, $25 until they stepped into the position of being a member.
Any other thoughts? I like this. I think it's good to be offering a stipend for folks to reduce any barriers for participation. So yeah, I think it looks good. What's next, Colleen?
What's next is to talk about our timeline. So next week,
Do we want to go back and resolve that other issue first before we get to next steps?
Sure. Which issue?
I felt like we didn't resolve the question about process. We kind of left that open. Do you feel like you got resolution on that?
I feel like I have quite a bit of information about process. We'll provide you all with next week the charter, the process, and the draft of the application to approve, so we can finalize everything next week.
Okay, so we'll have another chance to weigh in on what you've discerned from this conversation next week.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay.
Yep. And then our goal would be to open that task force application as quickly as possible. We would want to have that task force application open, I would say 3 to 4 weeks. Hold a board and commission meeting to review those applications and recommend members so the slate can be adopted at the January 22nd council meeting, and convene that first meeting then the week of January 29th.
All right, questions or comments on that? Okay. Oh, no, we have a hand. Councilor Phillips.
I guess, I agree with this. I'm just concerned, what happens if it ends up taking a couple more weeks? Is that a possibility, or are we pretty confident that we could actually do this?
If it takes a couple more weeks, so I've been involved in plenty of processes where we open up applications, we don't get what we want. Maybe it's not the volume, or we need to go out and seek representation. We extend the timeline, and that's okay.
All right, any other questions or comments on this topic? All right, thanks everybody for the conversation. Thank you, Colleen. We look forward to seeing you again next week. All right, we are on to item 5B. Let's see, Councilor Nishioka, or Councilor Phillips, do you have a motion?
I move Staff recommendation for 5B, which is to authorize the city manager to, 1, execute an assignment and assumption of purchase and sale agreement to acquire property located at the 2500 block of Center Street northeast from Salem Health, and 2, execute a purchase and sale agreement to convey the property to Greenlight Home First LLC, and 3, upon acquisition of the property by the city, execute a lease of the property to Greenlight in a form of a lease mutually agreed to by the parties.
Second. All right, I think we're going to have a presentation by Mr. Atchison. He has left his chair and is at the podium. Hit that button for the microphone, please. State your name for the, no.
Thank you, Dan Atchison, City Attorney. I'm presenting on 5B. This was the acquisition of the Salem Health property. As you heard from Mr. Lawler, the parties, Greenlight Home First, has entered into a purchase and sale agreement with Salem Health to acquire the former Salem General Hospital property. The property is approximately 10 acres, bounded by D Street and Center Street. The purchase price is $4 million. It was appraised at $4.2 million. So Home First, as you heard, is an affordable housing developer. Greenlight Home First, excuse me. I'm going to refer to them as Home First in this presentation. Is an affordable housing developer in contract to purchase the former Salem General Hospital property from Salem Health. Home First is unable to close in time due to complications with their financing, and Salem Health is unable to grant an extension past the current deadline of January 31st, 2024. The parties have asked the city to step in and acquire the property and convey it to Home First by the end of calendar year 2024. The city, Salem Health, and Home First have reached a tentative agreement for the city to acquire the property from Salem Health. The city would not have to pay Salem Health until December 31st of 2024. If Greenlight is able to timely close with the city would simply transfer the proceeds from Greenlight to Salem Health. If Greenlight is unable to close by December 31st, the Salem will need to utilize bond funds to pay Salem Health for the purchase price. The property is ideally suited for affordable housing development. It's centrally located within the city. It's near retail, transit, and parkland, and is adjacent to the Housing Authority's Yaquina Hall. If Greenlight is unable to close, the city will be able to program the property for affordable housing development. Upon execution of the assignment of the purchase and sale agreement by the city will work with Greenlight to complete due diligence and site investigation, including ground penetrating radar work. We met with the City Bond Steering Committee last week, who approved the use of bonds funds for this acquisition if it's necessary. The key terms: the purchase price of $4 million. Greenlight Home First has already contributed $150,000 in earnest money. There are some other set-offs, so the actual purchase price by the city will be approximately $3.8 million. As I noted, it was appraised at $4.25 million, and our payment of the purchase price to Salem Health will be deferred until December 31st. The city and Greenlight will execute a purchase and sale agreement to convey the property to Greenlight by December 31st, 2024, with a potential extension through January 31st, 2025, not 24. That extension through 2025 was necessary for part of their financing. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there questions for Mr. Atchison? Councilor Nordick.
So to be clear, City Attorney, we would not be using general fund dollars if we have to come in and save the day here.
Correct. General fund dollars would not be at issue.
Okay. Because the people already voted to approve bond funds, including bond funds specifically for affordable housing?
That's correct. That's part of the bond.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Atchison? Councilor Phillips.
I'm not sure if they're best asked to Mr. Atchison, but we had public testimony that I think touched on this in terms of like wanting to see in a future state some improvements at least to D Street. And I guess my question is more conceptual. This seems like a different point in the process than when we would normally be requiring, frontage street improvement and so forth. Help me understand that. Like, do you have any comments on that earlier mentioned testimony?
There's two different issues at play. One, where we would be executing a purchase and sale agreement with Greenlight to sell the property to Greenlight after we acquire it from Salem Health. As the owner of the property, we could require certain conditions of future development. There's also the land use piece. Whoever develops the property will have to go through various land use processes, including site plan, where they would take into account what the required improvements would be. So if council has feedback as far as what we would include into that purchase and sale agreement to Greenlight, that would be helpful to get at this time. Process-wise, we would come back to council prior to close, if necessary, if you would like to review the specifics that are in that purchase and sale agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Atchison. I think that, I guess I have several comments on this whole topic. I somehow managed to get involved personally in this whole transaction unintentionally, but I was trying to help facilitate a deal that did not involve the city, and ultimately that turned out to be the best for the sale to go through, is for the city to sort of be an intermediary. And so I was happy to offer that to staff as a potential positive outcome for this, because I think it's a really great development that I'm really excited for. It's a piece of property that's gone unused for a number of years, so I was really glad to be able to help facilitate that. So I think that one thing that I want Mr. Lawler to understand is that we really value our neighborhood associations here and in the land use process. I really liked what you said about the path. We have a really great example kind of next door at Jory Apartments that sort of incorporates all of the elements that we value in the city into a multifamily that is really a community asset. And that's something that we would like to see with this project as well. I should say I would like to see, and I believe my colleagues agree with that in general. So it's really important to us that you engage with the neighborhood associations. This is a unique property. It's in one, but right on the border of another. And so you probably need to be talking with more than one neighborhood association, but certainly the one where it's located. And that's really critical. And I think it's, of course, to me, it goes without saying, but since we had public testimony on it, I'm going to speak to it. We want all of these developments to further our overall goals that we've set. So I think things like climate action and those sorts of things are all really important, and anything you can do to help with that. We've eliminated the parking minimums all over the city, so I would encourage you to think about that as you're figuring out how much parking you need in that area. Also, I think it's really important to think about D Street. There is no sidewalk on the south side of D west of this property, and that's a primary route to schools for a lot of kids. So it's something that's really important to think about as well. So those are my thoughts on it. And I would like to see, to whatever extent we can, those be incorporated. Since we do have the opportunity now that we're going to own the property for a little while, it's kind of like Block 50 downtown or the other parcel that we purchased, where we get to actually direct how it's developed because we own it. And so I would like to see, we're kind of in a unique situation here. I would like to see some of those things sort of outlined in any sort of secondary agreement that we have with Greenlight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One fact I did omit from the presentation is during the pendency after the city acquires it and before Greenlight acquires it, we will be leasing the property to Greenlight for no money, but they will be responsible for maintaining it and insuring it. So it's not a burden on the city as part of the time that we do own it.
Great, that's an important detail. Thank you. Are there additional questions or comments? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy, and I appreciate you making those statements as I had written down basically the same thing. So I would like to have that incorporated in the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any additional comments or questions? Councilor Phillips. And then Councilor
I'll try to be brief. Mainly, I think this is good. I mean, it's cool that the voters, trusted us with the infrastructure bond that included $10 million to help pencil out, affordable housing in our community. And I mean, we can't emphasize enough that this money's not coming from the general fund. It's coming from the infrastructure bond, and it's to create, I think all of us want to see the affordable housing in our community. And this location is great. I mean, it's near central services. So, I commend you, Mayor Hoy, for making this happen, and for everybody staying at the table to make sure that we didn't lose this opportunity. I'm excited to vote on this, and I couldn't have summarized, what you said and all your points on D Street and otherwise in terms of trying to meet our property, our strategic plan goals and so forth, and meeting with the neighborhood association. Spot on. I agree with it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gwynn.
I was just going to say kudos for thinking outside the box and bringing this so that we can increase our affordable housing. So it's a great project.
Thank you, Councilor. Any additional questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Staley.
I would like to point out the work that Dan Atchison, our city attorney, did to bring these two parties together. This agreement wouldn't have happened without Dan's work, so nicely done, Dan. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton absent. Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez absent. Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordyke?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye, motion passes. On to item 3.2E, our pulled consent calendar item. Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. Yes, I pulled this because,
Motion, please.
thank you. Let's see, I need to find the emotion. Where is it? Sorry. I move as staff directed for 3.3E. I think it's 3.3E.
3.2E.
3.2E, as staff directed.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion by Nishioka, second by Phillips.
I just wanted to get to my points.
I see that.
I just wanted to highlight all of the excellent work that's been done for our city and for the citizens whose insurance has gone down, and the floodplain, and the committee members that I see that are on this. I want to thank them and say wholeheartedly that many parts of Ward 2 have issues with flooding, and it is a very important aspect to many of the residents along the way, and I'm just very grateful that this is taking place.
Thank you, Councilor. I was hoping that our city manager could add a little bit of more depth so people understand exactly what this is going to do and how important it is.
Gladly, and first off, I'd just like to acknowledge that our floodplain administrator is here this evening, Robin Delkey. You do have to get a certification in order to be a floodplain manager, and I believe Robin has that certification, so congratulations to her.
Wave, Robin. Wave to everybody knows who you are. There you go.
Waves to the adoring public. The floodplain planning process that we went through allows us to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And without being a participant in that program, property owners and businesses and renters would not be eligible for acquiring flood insurance protection. And the only way you can acquire flood insurance protection is through this program. So hats off to Robin and the team for their work in securing this for the city for yet another 5 years. They come in and they actually audit your performance relative to enforcement of the regulations. My understanding is we did well there and will continue to do well there. We're skilled at this. We understand the regulatory environment. And I look forward to 5 more years of being in the National Flood Insurance Program. So thank you. I did not realize that you could get flood insurance as a renter. I learned that today in just taking a quick look at the internet. So it's eligible for property owners, for business owners, and for renters.
Good information to have. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anything else on this one? Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a great conversation with Robin Dahlke today, and she taught me some things, and I think it would be really cool if she would be willing to share a little tiny bit with everybody. What's the difference between a floodway and a floodplain? And how does FEMA determine those lines?
She's stepping up to the mic now.
Yay.
Good evening, Robin Dahlke. I'm with Community Development Services Operations Manager, and Floodplain Administrator. Wear a couple hats, but this is my passion area. I've been involved in the Floodplain Management Program administration for about 10 years. I've been a certified floodplain manager, and this planning process has taught me a lot through just experience in the office, but then through the committee planning process that we've done. We haven't seen flood map changes in Salem in over 20 years. One of the misconceptions I think sometimes that we hear, and this planning process does not do anything to change our flood maps, but there are actions in this planning process that help us kind of cater our outreach to the community and help explain things like what is the difference between a floodplain and a floodway. We talked about a scenario where a site may look very similar to a neighboring property, but there's an invisible swath of land designated through that property that's been defined as floodway, which is that high velocity, highly regulated and a highly restrictive area to keep any encroachments out of, because in the event of a what's commonly known as 100-year flood, that area needs to be free and clear to allow that fast-moving flood water to flow. So we don't want any buildings, fill, berms, decks, anything in that area. But those are all invisible lines, and if you're not familiar with the floodplain, flood map areas or know where those resources are, it can be really confusing when you're just on the ground looking around and seeing, well, why can't I have a deck? My neighbor has one. And those boundaries are set by FEMA. Like I said, haven't been updated in 20 years. But being really involved in this floodplain management process, we're able to better regulate those areas and make sure that any developer coming in to the city of Salem is aware of what they can and cannot do to prevent flood risk, not only to the community, but to their property, their business, and their property that they own.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Staley has one additional thing to add.
And we did not schedule this specifically on this evening because we're anticipating 2 inches of rain tomorrow, but we certainly may be exercising our flood protection insurance program in the very short term. Let's hope not.
To top that, we actually have a flood desktop or a tabletop exercise that was scheduled tomorrow we scheduled it months ago, but that's another example of why this program is so important, because we're audited on a yearly basis. We have to show that we've been doing tabletop exercises to practice in the event of a flood. We actually already had this scheduled for a department or a dispatch operations center exercise tomorrow out at the new Public Works building. So we'll be there. We'll be watching the event at the same time and practicing in case it does elevate. So,
thank you for all your good work on this. I appreciate it.
yes, thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Nishioka.
I'll just finish that. I'm really glad that I highlighted this so we could hear from Robin and other councilors. Thank you.
Anything else? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Stapleton, absent. Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez, absent. Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike?
Aye.
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. All right, on to information reports. We have no information reports this evening. No first readings, so second readings. Item 7.2A.
Engrossed ordinance bill number 15-23, an engrossed ordinance relating to amending the Salem Transportation System Plan, a component of the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan, and amending SRC 64.005. Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez absent. Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike?
Aye.
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton absent. Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. Item 7.2B.
Ordinance Bill Number 16-23, an ordinance relating to the sign code amending SRC 300.850, 900.005, .020, .025, .030, .050, .055, .060, .0.70, .075, .080, .085, .090, .095, 1.00, .105, .110, .115, .120, .125, .130, .135, .140, .145, .150, .155, .160, .165, .170, .175, .185, .195, .215, .230, .245, .265, .275, .280, .300, .305, .330, .335, .340, .345, .350, and deleting SRC 900.035, SRC 900.040, .045, .065, .180, .190, .200, .205, .210, .220, .225, .290, .310, .315, .325. Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez absent. Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike?
Aye.
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton absent. Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Anderson-Ogilvie, and to all of your staff. It's finally happened. All right. Item 7.2C.
Ordinance Bill Number 18-23, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 7002 Sunnyside Road Southeast and 7102 Cains Place Southeast, annexed to the City of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Salem Suburban Rural Fire Protection District. Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez absent. Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike?
Aye.
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton absent. Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. All right. We are on to item 8, public comment. Other than agenda items, we have one person signed up. We have Ron Sturba. There he is. Ron, step up to the microphone. Please hit the green button so the light comes on. Introduce yourself and your address or your ward for the record. You have 3 minutes. When the yellow light flashes, you'll have 1 minute left. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and the staff and city council members and the residents here. It saddens me that there was a tragic accident on Cordon Road and Highway 22. If you take a look at the arrow on Kubler, that's pretty much close to where the accident happened. And I want to tell you that on the bridge over Highway 22, the speed limit is 55 miles an hour. And there's a sign that says bikes in the roadway. This is insane. I've tried 4 to 5 years to get that changed, as well as a state representative. Tom Anderson says it's insane. We need to change that to 40 miles an hour up to Lancaster, Onville, Kubler interchange.
You know, I've been an advocate for streetlights in this city, and within the last month, I've turned in over a dozen streetlights that are out. And one in particular at the corner of Center and Capitol. It's been out since April of 2022, next to McDonald's and the crosswalk. I turned one, actually 3 of them, at Mission and Commercial Street. 3 lights out there. Governor Kotek goes through the intersection. She needs to have somebody with ODOT. I bring up ODOT because some of the roadways here in the downtown area are state highways. The jurisdiction for the streetlights doesn't lay upon the city, but upon the state. Now, in the crisis we have, we paid $2.80 a month for city streetlights. I know that. I've been there. And I want to say that the city is overburdened with a lot of stress, but I would like to bring up a new tune here that all city neighborhood associations should have a listing of the street lights in their area so that we can go out and look in the neighborhood and say, this street light is out, let's turn it in. Right now, that street light at Center and Capitol, they owe me $55 for the amount of money I paid into that street light fee that I didn't get. I thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we can keep our cities nice and clean. And I'm there to strive to keep our community good and strong.
Thank you, Mr. Sturba. Mr. Martin, who controls the speed limit on Cordon Road over the Highway 22?
I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, if it's us or ODOT. I'm sorry, us or Marion County. I'll have to look into that and
Could you
I
check
can
on
get back to you
that?
tomorrow.
That's a concern that I've had for quite some time as well, that, well, all of the I don't think Cordon Road should be 55 anywhere, but that's just my take on it. But I would be interested to know more about that.
Okay, we'll get information and share it with the
Councilor
council.
Hoy.
Thank you. I'm with you on that. The speed limit's high, and if you haven't been on that bridge, it's very narrow. And bicycles tend to ride out there too, and it is very dangerous. So thank you. Thank you for testifying.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
Appreciate it, Mr. Sturba.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hoy, and thank you, Ron, for coming down. I'm sorry that you had to share tragic news.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. This area was one of the reasons why I wanted to serve on our local MPO, SCATS. I've never heard anybody who's looked at this who's felt otherwise, that the speed limit is too fast on Cordon Road. So I too want that information. Thank you, Mayor, for requesting it. I would be interested if it's possible or feasible or within our jurisdiction of starting a speed limit traffic safety plan process there. I mean, we know it's limited sight distance, it's super narrow, there's not even like a painted line, it's just those concrete barriers on a super narrow overpass. So thank you for requesting that information, Mayor Hoy.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything further on that? All right. We are adjourned.